I've moved your inheritance into my personal account. It's better this way. That was it. No hi, no explanation, no apology, just theft typed in Helvetica. At 11:22 p.m. Arizona time, my 12-year marriage ended not with a scream or a slam of the door, but with an email. It was past 1:30 in the morning in Charleston, South Carolina. I sat alone in the dim glow of my home office. The walls around me were lined with architectural sketches, projects from a life I'd built with precision. Outside, a coastal breeze whispered through the hydrangeas in the backyard. I had planted them, stone by stone, bloom by bloom, alongside my wife, Alyssa. We used to call that garden our forever project. Tonight, it felt like a museum of a love that no longer existed. My name is Daniel Monroe, 44, commercial architect. I run a successful firm, design buildings meant to outlive me, and until recently, I thought I understood structural integrity, both in architecture and in people. My wife, Alyssa Monroe, was supposed to be at a yoga retreat in Scottsdale. She owned a wellness brand that had gone national. Matcha powders, essential oils, guided meditations on YouTube. On paper, she was thriving. In person, she had become someone I barely recognized. And now, she was someone who'd stolen from me. The email wasn't even the worst part. It was the photo she attached. Blurry. Her and a man I didn't know. Wine glasses, sunset. His hand on her lower back like he lived there. And that smile. God, that smile. It wasn't meant for me. The inheritance she mentioned? $587,000. Left to me by Aunt Margaret, the only family I had left after my parents died in a car crash when I was 14. She'd worked double shifts at the hospital for 30 years and invested everything quietly, conservatively. Her note in the will was simple. Build something that lasts. I planned to. I already had. But not with Alyssa anymore. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just stood up, walked to the kitchen, and filled a glass with cold water. The silence in the house was familiar. For the past year, it had been louder than any argument. Alyssa had stopped talking, stopped laughing, stopped choosing me. The signs were subtle at first. More retreats, more time away. Her phone was always face down. She'd changed her passwords. Conversations got shorter, colder. She once asked me casually about the inheritance, where it was, how it was structured. I gave vague answers. That was when I knew. 3 months ago, I began preparing. I had meetings. I had documents reviewed. I had conversations I never thought I'd need to have. Alyssa thought she was planning, but I was planning better. I reopened my laptop. I reread the email one more time. No Daniel, no remorse. Just that line. It's better this way. I typed 6 words in response. Thanks for letting me know. And then I pressed send. No questions, no fight, no begging. Just closure. Then I powered down the screen and went to bed. I lay in our oversized king bed, the same one we picked out together in Savannah before we moved. I expected the mattress to feel colder, emptier. Instead, I slept better than I had in months. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was because I finally stopped pretending. Maybe it was because I knew something Alyssa didn't. She thought she had pulled the rug out from under me. She thought she had control. But the truth, the money she believed she moved, was never there to begin with. I had already placed it in an irrevocable trust, protected by law, inaccessible without very specific credentials that she would never have. She thought she was 2 steps ahead. She didn't realize I had started playing a whole different game. And the first move was silence. Sometimes betrayal doesn't arrive all at once. It comes in whispers, changed passwords, shorter phone calls, the way someone laughs, but not with you. I didn't lose Alyssa in one moment. I lost her piece by piece. 3 months before the email, Charleston was in spring bloom. Azaleas spilled over fences. The marshes shimmered in late afternoon light. I remember one evening in particular. Alyssa sat on the porch scrolling her phone, smiling at something I couldn't see. I brought her a glass of white wine. She said thank you without looking up. That was when I knew something was already gone. Alyssa Monroe was never sloppy. She built her wellness brand from scratch. Organic bath bombs, eco-friendly yoga mats, meditation workshops in boutique resorts. She knew how to curate an image, and she knew how to hide what didn't fit that image. But lately, she'd been more careful than usual. And I'd learned to pay attention to careful. It started with questions. Not accusatory ones, just subtle inquiries. Where exactly is your aunt's inheritance sitting right now? Shouldn't we diversify your assets in case something happens? Don't you think it's inefficient to have so many different accounts? They sounded like business advice, but Alyssa had never cared about my finances before. And then, the trips started getting longer. 2-day wellness events became 4-day retreats. 4-day getaways turned into week-long strategy summits in Sedona, in Santa Fe, in Scottsdale. She always came back with sage bundles and vague stories, but not once did she bring back warmth. One afternoon, Greg Matthews, our neighbor from 2 doors down, came by with a loaf of banana bread his wife had made. As we chatted in the driveway, he said casually, "By the way, saw Alyssa getting dropped off last week. I thought you were out of town." I was. At a 3-day conference in Boston. I smiled and said thanks. Didn't ask questions. Didn't react. But inside, something clicked. That evening I checked our shared cloud drive. There were new folders, ones she thought I wouldn't notice. Home renovation ideas, she called them. But inside, I found screenshots of my financial accounts. PDFs of statements. Notes in her handwriting about transfer protocols. She was casing me like a job. Then came the call that changed everything. Mark Levine, my firm's financial advisor, rang me during lunch. "Someone's been trying to access your trust accounts," he said. "They had your social security number, but couldn't answer the security questions. The system flagged it as suspicious." "Which accounts?" I asked. He didn't need to say. It was Aunt Margaret's inheritance. The money Alyssa believed was still sitting vulnerable in a standard brokerage account. That was the moment I stopped hoping she'd change. I started protecting myself. The next morning, I called Rebecca Klein, Aunt Margaret's estate attorney. We had coffee at her office downtown. "She was wise," Rebecca said after reviewing the structure. "An irrevocable trust protects the principal entirely. It can't be touched, even by a spouse." I nodded. "Now I need to make sure that every access attempt is documented." We set up a monitoring system, real-time alerts for login attempts, IP tracking, failed verifications. Every breadcrumb Alyssa left behind would now lead back to her. This wasn't revenge. This was preservation. That night, Alyssa returned from one of her retreats. She kissed me absently on the cheek, barely making eye contact. "I might extend this next trip," she said as she unpacked her essential oils and linen tunics. "I really want to deepen my practice." I helped load her car the next morning. As she pulled out of the driveway, I gave her a wave. She smiled like everything was normal. What she didn't know was that I had already taken back control. She was walking into her own trap, and I was holding the blueprint. She thought she was 2 steps ahead. What she didn't realize was that I'd already drawn the entire map, and every move she made only led her deeper into it. The day after Alyssa left for Scottsdale, the house was quiet again. But it wasn't the same kind of silence as before. This time, it was the kind that follows clarity. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, the late morning sun falling across the hardwood floors we had once argued over. She had insisted on bamboo. I wanted walnut. I'd won that one. It was one of the last things I had won in our marriage. Now, I was ready to win something far more important. Rebecca Klein, Aunt Margaret's longtime attorney, had become my point person for everything inheritance-related. She was precise, measured, and rarely surprised. But even she raised an eyebrow when I told her what I'd found. "This isn't carelessness," she said after reviewing Alyssa's activity. "It's calculated." Calculated didn't scare me. Calculated I could outmaneuver. In our shared cloud drive, Alyssa had left behind digital footprints. She must have assumed I never checked it. After all, I hadn't touched the folder labeled Home Renovation Ideas in months. It was supposed to house mood boards and flooring quotes. Instead, I found screenshots of my financial dashboards, notes titled Protocol, Transfer Steps, A photo of a whiteboard with my total inheritance amount. A line subtracting 20% labeled as transfer fee. She had been preparing to take what wasn't hers, not on impulse, not out of emotion, but methodically, like planning a product launch. With Rebecca's help, I upgraded the monitoring on the trust accounts. Now, anytime someone attempted access, we'd receive IP address, timestamp, device ID, geographic location. We installed alerts that would ping both our phones within 10 seconds of a failed login. Rebecca also worked with the trust company's legal team to prepare full logs for court admissibility. Meanwhile, I didn't snoop through Alyssa's personal files or hack into her devices. I didn't need to. Her arrogance was already working for me. She believed I was still clueless, still the loving husband tucked safely in denial. But I had already begun gathering the dominoes, and now I was lining them up. That Friday, while organizing documents, I received 3 alert pings in a row, all from Scottsdale, all failed attempts to access the trust. Rebecca called within minutes. "We've got it logged," she said. "Everything. Same IP, same device. Your wife's email server matches the same network from the transfer attempt." That was all I needed. Now I had proof of intent. Not just a hunch, not just suspicion. Hard, time-stamped digital evidence of attempted financial fraud. What Alyssa thought was a quiet theft was now a documented crime. I called Jonathan Fields, the divorce attorney Rebecca had recommended months ago. "Just in case," she'd said at the time. When I explained the situation, he didn't blink. "We'll move fast," he told me. "Once we file citing financial misconduct, her legal leverage drops to 0. He began drafting paperwork that afternoon. I sent him everything: emails, screenshots, access logs. He coordinated with Rebecca to solidify timelines and confirm the trust's protected status. There was no need for confrontation, no need to raise my voice. This wasn't a fight. It was a removal. I closed my laptop and walked through the house that evening. Every piece of furniture we'd picked together, every painting we'd hung side by side. It all felt like props in a stage play I hadn't realized I was in. But now, the script had changed, and the lead actress didn't know her exit scene was already written. She made the first move, but I had already played the last. This wasn't a standoff. It was a quiet, legal checkmate, and the Queen never saw it coming. It was Saturday morning in Charleston. The kind of morning where the air smelled like sun-warmed pine and the tide rolled in just enough to kiss the marsh grass. I sat at the breakfast bar sipping coffee, watching the ice melt in my glass more rapidly than usual. The silence around me was peaceful this time, not hollow. By now, the trap was set. The system had recorded 3 unauthorized attempts to access my inheritance account. All from Scottsdale. All blocked. Alyssa hadn't called, but I knew she would. Jonathan Fields, my divorce attorney, was the kind of man who never raised his voice but always got what he wanted. Methodical, sharp, clinical. He wasn't interested in courtroom drama. He was interested in winning. Rebecca Klein, Aunt Margaret's estate lawyer, was also on standby, keeping copies of every trust interaction. They had already spoken. Legal strategy was locked in. The documents were airtight. The only variable left was Alyssa Monroe. At exactly 12:04 p.m., her name flashed across my phone. Alyssa Monroe, mobile. I let it ring. She called again. This time, 3 rings before hanging up. Then a text. "Did you get my email?" I waited 5 minutes before responding with a single word. "Yes." 3 dots appeared. Then, "That's all you have to say?" I didn't answer. Instead, I grabbed my folder, got in the car, and drove downtown to Jonathan's office. We reviewed the timeline. Rebecca joined via Zoom. The evidence wasn't just compelling, it was surgical. Multiple failed access attempts, IP addresses traced to Scottsdale, screenshots of my accounts from our shared cloud, her admission via email of moving the inheritance. "This isn't just divorce," Jonathan said calmly. "It's financial misconduct." We printed everything. By 3:45 p.m., I had officially filed for divorce, citing attempted financial fraud and breach of marital trust. Jonathan had the documentation couriered to Alyssa's retreat address. Meanwhile, we prepared a notification for her counsel, if she had one. At 4:30, she called again. This time, I picked up. No greeting, no pause. "You're being childish," she said. I stayed silent. "This doesn't have to be ugly." "It's already clean," I said. "I'm just curious. Where are you staying these days?" She hesitated. "What does that matter?" "Just wondering where home is for you now." "Daniel," she sighed. "We need to be adults about this. The money's already moved. Fighting it will only cost us both." I kept my voice level. "You've said that twice now." Another pause. "I'm having my lawyer draw up a settlement proposal." "What's his name?" I asked. "David Lawrence." I wrote it down. "That's helpful. Thanks." Then I ended the call. Monday morning, Jonathan received a call from Lawrence. "We're hoping to resolve this amicably," he said, his voice formal. "Has your client fully disclosed the trust structure?" Jonathan asked. There was a pause on the other end. "She's provided documents, dated 3 months ago. We sent over the real ones." By Tuesday morning, David Lawrence had withdrawn as Alyssa's counsel. She called again. 4 times. No answer. Then, "What the hell did you do?" I forwarded the trust logs and monitoring report to Jonathan. We now had timestamps, access IPs, the name on the Wi-Fi account from Scottsdale. Alyssa had tried to rob a locked vault and left her fingerprints on the door. That evening, I poured myself a drink. 20-year Glenlivet. The bottle we had saved for our 15th anniversary. I sat at the same kitchen table where she once lit candles and talked about opening a spa together. Now, the only thing burning was my clarity. At 9:18 p.m., she texted again. "We need to talk." Now I replied, "Through your new attorney, when you have one." Another text. "You're overreacting." I was angry. I didn't actually move anything. My response, "That's not what the access logs show." She waited. Then finally, "What access logs?" I sent back one question. "Who is he?" 22 minutes of silence. Then, "This isn't about him." "Name?" "Trevor. Trevor Clay. But he's just helping me process things." Helping her process how to steal $500,000. Noted. The next morning, I met with Greg Matthews, our neighbor. "You said you saw someone drop her off while I was in Boston. Would you recognize him?" He nodded. "Tall. Beard. Gray Tesla." I showed him the blurry photo from the email. "That's him." He agreed to write a notarized statement. It wasn't about confrontation. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need closure from her. The game was already over. And now, it was time to make sure the record reflected every move. It wasn't just betrayal. It was architecture. A carefully constructed lie, built brick by brick, while I was away, building our life. It was Thursday morning when I walked into Brightstone Bank, the same place where Alyssa and I had refinanced our mortgage 2 years ago. Harold, the branch manager, still remembered my name. He offered me coffee, asked how the firm was doing. I smiled politely, but I wasn't here for small talk. "I need to go over all recent activity in our joint accounts," I told him. 6 months' worth. His eyebrows lifted slightly, but he nodded and led me to his office. Harold Boone was a career banker, slow to speak, cautious with words. He had helped us consolidate loans, even gifted us a wine opener for our 3rd anniversary. As he pulled up the records, his posture stiffened. "This may take a minute," he said. His eyes flicked across the screen, and his expression shifted, from neutral to concerned. I leaned in. "Something wrong?" He turned the monitor toward me. The list was long, too long. Small transfers at first. $2,000, $3,500. Then they grew. $11,000. $22,500. The most recent, $47,000. Just 2 weeks ago. All had gone to an external account. One I didn't recognize. Is this account also with Brightstone? I asked. Harold checked. No, it's with Northern Lakes Credit Union. I had never heard of it. Who's the account holder? He paused. Alyssa Monroe. Of course. Harold printed the transaction history. 6 months of slow siphoning. A total of $178,000 withdrawn from our joint account. Would you like a full certified copy for legal purposes? He asked quietly. I nodded. Yes, please. While he printed, I texted Jonathan. Confirmed. 178K moved. All documented. His reply came instantly. Meet me at the office in 1 hour. Before leaving the bank, I asked Harold one more question. The receiving address for the Northern Lakes account. Can you pull it up? He printed that too. Apartment 4B, Scottsdale, Arizona. I stared at the address for a full minute. She hadn't just created a new life. She'd given it a zip code. At Jonathan's office, the picture began forming in high resolution. This isn't emotional collapse, he said. This is premeditated asset relocation. Rebecca joined the meeting via video. We now had a notarized statement from Greg Matthews identifying Trevor Clay, full trust access logs, financial withdrawal records, proof of Alyssa's new residence. All signs pointed to Alyssa preparing for a total exit, one where she took the money and left the marriage without explanation or consequence. But now, there would be consequences. 7. G.I. Quiet. Falling action. That afternoon, Jonathan sent a legal package to Philip Barnes, Alyssa's newly hired attorney. Barnes had a reputation: sharp, aggressive, expensive. The kind of lawyer people hired when they planned to fight dirty. But we weren't fighting. We were presenting facts. Inside the package were the printed bank statements, screenshots of Alyssa's hidden cloud folders, the Scottsdale lease in her name, the affidavit from Greg Matthews, and a simple message from Jonathan. We are open to settlement discussions before emergency motions proceed. At 4:52 p.m., Barnes called back. We'd like to talk, he said. His tone was no longer aggressive. It was respectful. He'd seen enough. At 5:31 p.m., I received one final message from Alyssa that day. Let's handle this privately. There's no need to destroy each other. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. She had already destroyed the version of us that mattered. What remained now was division. Line by line, asset by asset, truth by truth. And next would come the negotiation. But this time, I wouldn't be negotiating from weakness. She wanted a clean break, but you can't steal something, hide the evidence in plain sight, and then ask for peace, not when the paper trail leads straight back to you. Monday morning, courthouse lobby. Sunlight sliced through the glass walls, casting long shadows over polished floors. It was supposed to be an emergency hearing, but Philip Barnes, Alyssa's new attorney, had requested a private negotiation instead. I waited in a consultation room with Jonathan. 2 cups of coffee sat untouched between us. Across the hall, Alyssa and Barnes were reviewing a file, our file. A thick binder of photos, transactions, leases, logs, witness statements. Her entire scheme laid bare in black and white. Through the glass, I saw her reaction. Shock. Then fear. Then something else. Resignation. Philip Barnes was every bit the legal wolf his reputation promised. Tailored suit, ice blue tie, silver cufflinks. But today his posture was different. He wasn't there to intimidate. He was there to retreat gracefully. Jonathan had anticipated this. He leaned back, calm, composed. He had seen this play before. And I? I was just tired. Not angry, not hurt. Just done. Barnes and Alyssa entered the room. She didn't look at me, didn't speak. Barnes began. My client proposes the following. She retains all funds currently in her possession. No further claims to other marital assets. No contestation of the trust. In return, Mr. Monroe agrees not to pursue criminal or civil charges. Jonathan raised an eyebrow. That's your clean split? He asked. Barnes nodded. She keeps what she has. He keeps what remains. Jonathan looked at me. I shook my head. No, it wasn't about revenge. But it wasn't going to be that easy either. Jonathan placed our counteroffer on the table. 1. Alyssa returns 50% of the $178,000 withdrawn from joint accounts. Exactly $89,275. 2. She signs a non-disclosure agreement, preventing her from speaking publicly or privately about the marriage, the divorce, or any financial claims. 3. She makes no claims to the inheritance or Daniel's company. 4. In return, Daniel will not pursue legal action for attempted fraud and will allow her to walk away without court proceedings. Barnes reviewed the terms silently. Alyssa glanced at him. She wasn't expecting this. She thought she'd be able to negotiate from the shadows, but now she was sitting fully in the light. Barnes opened the binder. He stopped at the Scottsdale lease, Greg's notarized witness statement, the IP logs and screenshots of account access, her own email admitting the transfer. He leaned toward Alyssa and whispered something. She stared at the table, then slowly nodded. Barnes turned to Jonathan. My client accepts the terms. Jonathan slid the agreement forward. Alyssa picked up the pen. Her hand shook as she signed. Then I signed mine. 2 copies, 1 envelope each. It was over. No ceremony. No rage. No apology. Just signatures, silence, and finality. As we stood, I pulled a second envelope from my briefcase and slid it across the table. Alyssa hesitated. What's this? Passwords, I said simply. To the house alarm, cloud storage, and anything else you might need to retrieve what you left behind. She looked up at me for the first time in weeks. Her eyes searched for anger, or victory, or grief. She found none. I was empty, not hollow, just clean. It was never about the money, I said softly. That would have been simpler. Barnes touched her arm and gestured toward the door. She left without looking back. 2 days later, $89,275 hit my account. No message, no name attached, just a transaction labeled Final Transfer. Jonathan confirmed the NDA was filed. The trust remained untouched. The house and business were solely mine. I stood in the living room that night, staring at the hydrangeas through the window. 12 years of marriage, 14 months of deception, and 1 clean exit. The chapter had closed, but a new one was about to begin. One I would write on my own terms. A house doesn't haunt you with noise. It haunts you with silence. The kind that lingers in door frames, that whispers through hallways, that settles in the spaces where love used to live. 6 weeks after the divorce was finalized, I put the Victory Drive house on the market. Charleston was in the middle of spring, but the house felt frozen in time, like a diorama of a life I no longer belonged to. I walked through it room by room, the kitchen with its wine-stained floorboards, the guest room Alyssa had filled with crystals, the back porch where we once planned summer barbecues that never happened. I'd won the house, but I had no desire to live in a museum. The couple who bought it were young, early 30s, with twin boys and a golden retriever named Max. They toured the house with open smiles and matching energy. "We've been dreaming of a craftsman with a wraparound porch," the wife said, running her fingers along the handrails I had sanded myself. I liked them immediately, not because they were perfect, but because they weren't haunted. They weren't walking into a house full of memories. They were walking into possibility. Letting go wasn't the hard part. It was what came after. I moved into a loft near the riverfront, just 15 minutes from my firm. Brick walls, industrial lighting, exposed beams. It was clean, minimal, mine. But the silence was different now. Not heavy, not accusatory, just blank. Alyssa hadn't reached out since the settlement. No texts, no emails. The NDA ensured it stayed that way, but even if it hadn't, I don't think she would have tried. There was nothing left to say, and I didn't need an apology, only space to rebuild. I poured myself into work. We landed a hospital renovation project in Atlanta and a new sustainability campus in Raleigh. I redesigned the lobby of a tech incubator that had once turned me down years ago. In the evenings, I walked along the river, past the cafes and jazz bars and rooftop lounges. No destination. Just movement. Just breath. Rebecca Klein called me one evening. "I've been thinking about something your aunt said once," she said. "She always wanted her legacy to fund something meaningful." I smiled. She wanted me to build something that lasts. "Well," Rebecca said, "we think we found the first candidate." Her name was Sierra Thompson, 17 years old, from Macon, Georgia. She'd lost both parents in a car accident at 12. Raised by her grandmother, she worked part-time at a construction firm while maintaining a 4.0 GPA. Her essay began, "I believe architecture can be medicine. Buildings should heal, not just house." I read it twice. Then I called Rebecca. "Let's do it." The Margaret Monroe Foundation for Future Architects awarded Sierra its first full-ride scholarship 2 weeks later. I attended the ceremony. She cried. I didn't. But when she hugged me, I felt something shift. It was the first time in a long time I felt proud of something personal. Not professional, not reactionary, but soul deep. That night, I returned to my loft and opened a bottle of wine. Not for nostalgia, but celebration. I walked through my new space with no ghosts, no echoes, just bare walls and hardwood floors ready for new memories. And then, as I sorted through mail, I saw it. A plain white envelope, no return address. Inside was a check for exactly $89,275. The remainder of what Alyssa had taken and returned only half of. No letter, no signature, just a sticky note. Not just the money. I stood there, holding the past in one hand and the future in the other. And for the first time, neither one weighed more. The next morning, I deposited the check straight into the foundation. Another scholarship. Another blueprint for a life that deserved better beginnings. Later that day, Jerry, my financial advisor, texted, "Dinner still on? I'm bringing that architect I told you about." I looked at the clock. Enough time to walk, change, and get there. Enough time to say yes to whatever came next. Some people spend years chasing revenge. Me? I deposited it into a scholarship fund and walked towards something better. Closure isn't about getting even. It's about getting free. Friday evening, just before sunset, the Charleston sky was brushed with coral and lavender, the kind of soft colors you don't notice unless your life has finally gone quiet enough to see them. I stood on the riverfront, the same bench where Alyssa and I once sat years ago, dreaming up a wellness center I would design and she would run. We had big plans. None of them came true. Now, the bench was just a bench. The river just water. The memory, just that. Jerry, my financial advisor, was meeting me for dinner. Something casual at a restaurant we both liked on East Bay Street. He had mentioned a guest, an architect he thought I should meet. Said she reminded him of me in the early years. Sharp, a little stubborn, and obsessed with spatial design that feels like breathing. I wasn't looking to meet anyone. Not professionally, not personally. But I had learned to stop saying never. Some doors open when you're not forcing them. The envelope from Alyssa still sat on my kitchen counter. The $89,275 she returned. Quietly, discreetly, late. There was no legal requirement, no demand. Just a note that read, "Not just the money." I hadn't responded. I didn't plan to. Not because I was angry, but because responding would imply there was still something between us that needed mending. There wasn't. The story was over. And she had finally turned the last page. So had I. I dropped the check into the foundation account that morning. Rebecca sent back a confirmation with a note. "That's 2 more scholarships funded." I forwarded the update to Sierra Thompson, our first recipient. She replied with an emoji and a long string of capital letters that read like excitement without punctuation. It made me smile. She was why the pain had been worth it. Without Alyssa's betrayal, I might have sat on that inheritance for years, waiting for some perfect use. Instead, I had built something that would outlive both of us. Aunt Margaret would have approved. Dinner with Jerry was light. Laughter, bourbon, work gossip. His guest arrived 10 minutes late, slightly out of breath, holding rolled-up blueprints and an energy that filled the space before she even spoke. "Daniel Monroe, meet Elena Vasquez," Jerry said. "She's heading the new Youth Arts Center design." We shook hands. Hers was firm, confident, present. We talked about cantilevered staircases, adaptive reuse, and the difference between silence and stillness in design. She didn't ask about my personal life. I didn't offer it. But when she smiled at something I said about shadow lines and emotional memory in architecture, I felt something shift. Not a spark, but a door unlocking. After dinner, I walked home alone. Slow steps along the cobbled streets of Charleston. The air smelled like salt and jasmine. I passed the bookstore where Alyssa once bought me a sketchbook for our first anniversary. It was closed. I didn't stop. Didn't look through the window. Instead, I pulled out my phone and texted Jerry. "Thanks for the intro. She's good. Really good." He replied with a thumbs-up emoji and, "Told you. You needed someone who speaks blueprint." I laughed. Out loud. For the first time in a long time, it wasn't bitter or hollow. Just real. Back at my loft, I opened the windows. The breeze came in gently. No ghosts, no noise, just Charleston at peace. I sat down with my sketchbook, flipped to a blank page, and drew the first lines of something new. Not a home, not a business, just space, shape, vision. A blueprint with no past attached. The final line of Aunt Margaret's note echoed in my head. Build something that lasts. I finally understood. She didn't mean walls or windows. She meant integrity, purpose, peace. Sometimes, the strongest response to betrayal isn't revenge. It's rebuilding. And tonight, I wasn't thinking about Alyssa. I was thinking about light, space, and the foundation beneath it all. This was the life after, and I was ready to live it.